Hello and welcome. We are live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. Coming up in the next hour, US media sources say Marco Rubio is Donald Trump's choice as Secretary of State. Trump's Republican Party set to control both houses of Congress. Navin Ramgoolam to be the next Prime Minister of Mauritius. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulates the veteran politician and three-time former PM on his emphatic victory. Haiti's international airport shuts down amid surge in gang violence. Airlines suspend Haiti flights after plane hit by gunfire. India, Russia to hold 25th Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, Technical and Cultural Cooperation in New Delhi. And governments at COP29 talks approve new UN standards for international carbon markets, a key step towards allowing nations to trade credits to meet climate targets. Our top story. In the United States, President-elect Donald Trump is not wasting any time in selecting his team for a second term in the White House. In latest news, Trump has selected U.S. Senator Marco Rubio to be his Secretary of State. Florida-born politician is on track to be the first Latino to serve as America's top diplomat once the Republican president-elect takes office in January next year. Rubio has in years past advocated for a muscular foreign policy with respect to America's geopolitical foes, including China, Iran and Cuba. The Ukraine crisis will be high on Rubio's agenda. Rubio was also one of 15 Republican senators to vote against a $95 billion military aid package for Ukraine passed in April. Rubio's selection holds domestic as well as international significance. And by selecting Rubio for a key policy role, Trump may help consolidate gains among Latinos and make clear that they have a place at the highest levels of his administration. Rubio is a top China hawk in this Senate. And another major appointment announced is of Mike Waltz, selected to be the National Security Advisor. Waltz has served in the National Guard as a colonel. He criticized Chinese activity in the Asia-Pacific and has voiced the need for the United States to be ready for a potential conflict in the region. While slamming the Biden administration for a disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, Waltz has publicly praised Trump's foreign policy views. Waltz is also on the Republicans' China task force and also sits on the Intelligence, Armed Services and Foreign Affairs committees. He has supported aid to Ukraine in the past but has demanded conditions. Now, Trump has picked Republican Representative Elise Stefanik the job as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Stefanik, a Republican congresswoman from New York's 21st District, was elected last week to her sixth term in the House. She will inherit a role Nikki Haley held for 2 years in the first Trump administration. And former New York Representative Lee Zeldin will be leading the Environmental Protection Agency. Republican former Congressman Zeldin has frequently voted against legislation on the green issues. Trump is likely to reverse many rules administered by the EPA on the burning of fossil fuels, including one curbing carbon emissions from power plants and another slashing such emissions from vehicles. Trump has said he plans to begin rescinding EPA and Transportation Department vehicle pollution rules on his first day in office and is considering paring back or eliminating EV tax breaks and other incentives. Trump also plans to rescind California's ability to set its own vehicle emissions rules as it did in 2019. As a candidate for New York governor in the 2022 election, Zeldin criticized the state's decision to join California's zero-emission vehicle program that vows to end the sale of gasoline-powered only vehicles by 2035. And while counting for US House of Representatives still ongoing, many projections claim Trump is going to get majority in the lower house. That means out of total 435 legislators of the House, 218 are certain to go to Republicans, which has already grabbed majority in the Senate with 53 out of 100 seats in total. So winning both Senate and House of Representatives will be a big boost to the authority of President-designate Donald Trump, who envisages major policy changes in comparison to his former Joe Biden in both domestic and international arena. This will also mean that there will be no shutdown on budget-related provisions, as he will have majority in both Senate and the House of Representatives. And this majority will also allow him to move forward on slashing taxes and shrinking the federal government. As Trump has vowed to make major shift in immigration policies and the deportation of illegal immigrants, the majority in both lower and upper houses of the Capitol Hill will allow his choices to move forward. President-elect Donald Trump's Republican Party will control both the houses of Congress when he takes office on January 20th next year. Decision Desk headquarters projected on Monday. The new Congress convenes on January 3rd, days before Trump's inauguration at the White House. Shifting focus now, two-time Mauritius Prime Minister Navin Ramgoolam's alliance is set to win the country's parliamentary elections held on Sunday. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated Navin Ramgoolam on his electoral victory in Mauritius. In a social media post, PM Modi wished Ramgoolam success and said that he is looking forward to working with him to further strengthen the unique partnership between the two nations. On Monday, the incumbent Prime Minister Pravin Jagannath conceded defeat in the parliamentary elections and said that his political alliance was headed for a major loss in the polls. Final results are yet to be officially released, but opposition leader Navin Ramgoolam appeared set to take over as Prime Minister for the third time, heading the Alliance of Change coalition. And businessman Alex Didier Fils-Aimé has been sworn in as Haiti's new Prime Minister during a ceremony in Port-au-Prince, promising to restore security in the crisis-racked country. Haiti's Transitional Presidential Council appointed entrepreneur and former Senate candidate as Haiti's new Prime Minister on Monday. The council named Didier to replace Prime Minister Gary Conille, who was appointed in late May. After a ceremony in Port-au-Prince, Didier said transparency and good governance will be a priority for his government and pledged that inclusive, transparent and democratic elections will be held in the country.
Transparency and good governance in the management of public affairs will be a priority for my government. We will work towards social cohesion, a necessary condition for the restoration of the state and the holding of inclusive, transparent and democratic elections. Only this will grant the state legitimate and constitutional authority.
Several airlines have suspended flights to Haiti after a passenger plane from the US was hit by gunfire as it tried to land in Port-au-Prince. Port-au-Prince Airport was subsequently closed indefinitely to all commercial flights. Spirit Airlines Flight 951 from Fort Lauderdale in Florida was diverted to the neighboring Dominican Republic, where it landed safely at Santiago Airport. A flight attendant suffered minor injuries, but no passengers were hurt in the attack, the second in 3 weeks on aircraft flying over Haiti's capital. The incident comes as the new Prime Minister took office in the crisis-hit country, which has been plagued by armed gangs and escalating violence. Now, Ecuadorian Vice President Veronica Abad called her temporary suspension until April an attack on the rule of law. Labour Ministry suspended Abad last week, just 3 months before next year's elections, in which Noboa will seek another term. On a video posted to social media, Abad said the suspension was an attempt to prevent her from assuming power once Noboa left his duties to start his campaign. Noboa on Monday named Planning Minister Sariha Moya to fill in for Abad. Abad was accused of committing a serious disciplinary offence by not complying with an order to travel to Turkey due to security concerns during the conflict in Gaza. All right, updates on West Asia conflict now. As US ramped up pressure on Israel to address Gaza aid crisis, Israel said it has met most demands by US ahead of the deadline. However, Israel also said that number of other things remain under discussion. Earlier in a letter, the Biden administration warned Israel of potential halt to arms transfers if it did not take actions to let more humanitarian aid into Gaza. Among the US demands that Israel appears to have refused is allowing the entry of 50 to 100 commercial trucks a day. The official said commercial activity had been halted because Hamas was controlling the merchants. And Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar said that there was progress in talks about a Lebanon ceasefire on Monday. He also said that war against Hezbollah was not yet over. He indicated Russia could play a part by stopping Hezbollah from rearming via Syria.
It is important that the principle that Hezbollah won't be able to arm again or to get new weapon systems, to take them into Lebanon and to renew the threat to the extent it was before this war. It is vital to the success of any arrangement in Lebanon. And the Russians are, as you know, present in Syria, and if they are agree with this principle, I think they can contribute to achieve effectively this objective. And if this objective will be achieved, then we can believe that this arrangement can be implemented more effectively.
Now, Hezbollah launched a fresh strike on Israel with a barrage of over 90 missiles aimed towards northern region on Monday. Israel said Iron Dome intercepted most rockets, but some hit Haifa Bay. The interception was caught on camera station in Tiberias on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Time now for a very short break, but still to come on this edition of DD India News Hour. Elaborate security cover in place for free and fair polls as Sri Lanka's campaigning for general elections end. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba survives a runoff vote to remain as Japan's PM. And Germans kick off the 5th carnival season at precisely 11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. Some more stories. In Sri Lanka, campaigning for the general elections ended Monday midnight as the island nation moved into a silent period. Polling for the general election will be held on Thursday between 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. at over 13,400 polling stations, where 17 million electorate will exercise their right to vote. Over 8,800 candidates are in the fray to be elected through 196 seats from 22 electoral districts and 29 national list seats. The Election Commission has said that over 75,000 police personnel have been deployed for the election process across the island. The elections are expected to set the tone for the country's political future under the leadership of President Dissanayake. Sri Lanka had elected NPP candidate Anura Kumara Dissanayake as the president in September this year, who days after assuming office dissolved the parliament, making way for snap elections. All right, we'll go across to Colombo. DD India's Dr. Ahmed Faruqi is joining us live from there. Dr. Faruqi, campaigning has ended and silent period has commenced. Tell us how many candidates are there in the fray and who holds the upper hand, prominent candidates.
Abhishek, you see, days after presidential elections were completed, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake had dissolved the parliament, making way for the elections that we are going to see on Thursday. There are more than 8,800 candidates in the fray, which includes the electoral district seats as well as the national seats, in which there will be some, politicians, some members of the parliament who will be nominated by each of the parties on the basis of the proportionate representation and the percentage of the seats they would have gained in the entire country. Frankly speaking, if you ask me, there are a few names which are significant in the political landscape of Sri Lanka right now who are in the fray, including Sri Lanka's Prime Minister, Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, the previous leader of opposition, as well as one of the candidates in the presidential election, Sajid Premadasa of SJB. In fact, also we have a few other prominent names who have been there in the government, in the previous governments, as well as in past as well. However, some new names are going to be seen because NPP, that is the National People's Power, which is currently ruling, that will have a considerable say in what will come out in these elections. In fact, NPP has been, it has taken a step further towards an inclusive kind of democracy by nominating one of the members of the persons from disability community as well. So there has been considerable interest with regard to how the presidential elections had been, and now going into the parliamentary elections, the interest exists, but not to the same level that we had seen at the time of presidential elections.
Right. Dr. Faruqi, also, and you think the upcoming election is significant as it could shape the political landscape of the country following an unprecedented economic crisis back in 2022?
You're absolutely right, Abhishek. You see, the economic crisis of 2022, the peak of it, which we had seen in 2022, it is still ongoing as of now. There are difficulties which are being faced by Sri Lankan people. If you look at common essentials, they are not at the same level that had been there before 2022. Partly because the import bills had risen, the rupee had devalued considerably, making way towards a galloping kind of an inflation hitting up to 70%. Now, the new government faces considerable challenge with regard to recovery of the economy as well as taking forward the IMF deal. The new government, which was elected in September, will have to take several steps towards alleviating the discomfort and the difficulties which the common man had faced. Now, this is where the new parliament will play a key role, because executive presidency is something which has been in Sri Lanka since 1978, and the president is all powerful. But the president also required some amount of support from the parliament, especially whenever it has to, approve certain bills and even for the budget as well. So a lot of importance will be there with regard to gaining a majority in these elections. The total house strength being 225, majority mark in this case will be 113. Experts have been saying that National People's Power has sufficient numbers and sufficient strength to muster the majority mark. There are also people who are saying that they might even go beyond the majority mark, but there are also another set of people who are saying that they will face considerable challenge in various places like the northern part of the island as well as the upcountry areas where they do not have that much ground support. So it needs to be seen how the electorate will give a decisive mandate or not to the NPP or to the opposition parties as well. Abhishek.
Right, happening after 4 years, elections will be held on November 14. We'll leave it at that. Thank you for your inputs, Dr. Faruqi.
Sure.
Shifting focus, Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has survived a runoff vote against the opposition but will face turmoil ahead amid anger over the ruling party's financial scandals. Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has vowed to transform the ruling party after he won a runoff vote in parliament to stay in his post. One of his top priorities is dealing with the aftermath of a major corruption scandal in the long-ruling Liberal Democratic Party. Ishiba appointed 3 new cabinet ministers, 1 each for transport, justice and agriculture, 2 of whom replaced LDP lawmakers who lost their seats in the lower house election. Ishiba called the snap poll after taking office on October 1st. The Liberal Democratic Party and their junior partner Komieto were unable to secure a majority in that vote. Now in Poland, tens of thousands of Poles, including nationalist opposition chiefs, walked through Warsaw in an annual Independence Day event held by the far right. Warsaw authorities said some 90,000 people took part in the march. The march has become a point of friction between Poland's hard right and conservatives on one hand and the liberal centre on the other. Donald Tusk's government has been in power since December, but its leftist and centre-right junior coalition members are struggling in opinion polls over key campaign issues such as return of abortion rights. While both the nationalist PIS party and the Tusk coalition support Ukraine in its conflict against Russia, some are frustrated by the influx of refugees from their eastern neighbour. And riot police in Amsterdam on Monday evening arrested several people over the attacks on Israeli soccer fans in the city late last week. Dutch police on Monday said they had arrested 5 more people for their suspected involvement in attacks on Israeli football supporters. Earlier on Monday, Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof denounced the attack as shocking and reprehensible. He said the investigations into the violence over the weekend were still ongoing.
The images and reports for Amsterdam and what we've seen this weekend of the anti-Semitic attacks against Israelis and Jews are nothing short of shocking and reprehensible. We don't know all the details still yet, but it's abundantly clear that all boundaries of acceptable behavior have been violated. The Dutch police and the prosecutor are now investigating with specific teams everything that happened.
In Serbia, thousands of protesters gathered in front of the government building demanding arrest of those responsible for an accident at a railway station in which 14 people were killed. Opposition activists vented their frustration that nobody has been detained nor prosecuted over negligence and corruption by the authorities. The protesters were supposed to hand their demands for the resignations of Prime Minister Milos Vučević and Novi Sad Mayor Milan Đurić to President Alexander Vučić. But the President Palace was locked and cordoned off by police, so they said they would hand the demands to the parliament. Protesters said unless their demands have been met, the opposition MPs will call for a parliament no confidence vote in the government. Moving on, New Zealand now on Tuesday offered a rare national apology to victims and families who were subjected to institutional physical and sexual abuse over the last 70 years. The apology followed a report by a public inquiry in July that found some 200,000 children and vulnerable adults experienced some form of abuse from 1950 to 2019.
Today I'm apologising on behalf of the government to everyone who suffered abuse, harm and neglect while in state care. Today make this apology to all survivors on behalf of my own and previous governments. I am sorry that many bystanders, staff, volunteers and carers turned a blind eye and failed to stop or report abuse. I am sorry that the state's oversight of people in care was so poor. I am sorry that many abusers were not made to face justice, which meant that other people experienced abuse that could have been prevented. I am sorry that the state did not act quickly and boldly enough to put much better protection in place for people in all care locations.
Now, governments at the COP29 talks approved Monday new UN standards for international carbon markets in a key step towards allowing countries to trade credits to meet their climate targets. On the opening day of the UN climate talks in Azerbaijan, nearly 200 nations agreed a number of crucial ground rules for setting a market in motion, breaking a years-long deadlock over contentious carbon markets. However, other key aspects of the overall framework still need to be negotiated, including creation of a robust market for high-quality credits. The International Emissions Trading Association, a business group that backs global carbon markets, has said total trading in the UN-backed market could, by 2030, generate $250 billion a year and cut 5 billion metric tons of carbon output annually. And Monday's deal could allow a UN-backed global carbon market to start up as soon as next year. The benchmarks adopted in Baku will allow for the development of rules, including calculating how many credits a given project can receive. Well, let's now tell you what is carbon credit and how actually does it work. So carbon credits were devised as a mechanism to reduce greenhouse gas or GHG emissions by creating a market in which companies can trade in emissions permits. So companies receive a set number of carbon credits under the system that decline over time. They can sell any excess to other companies. Carbon credits create a monetary incentive for companies to reduce their carbon emissions, and those that can't easily reduce emissions can still operate, but at a higher financial cost. One credit allows the emission of 1 ton of carbon dioxide or the equivalent of other greenhouse gases. Proponents of the carbon credit system say that it leads to measurable, verifiable emission reductions. And with the ultimate goal of reducing the emission of GHGs into the atmosphere, examples of projects could include cultivation of CO2 absorbing mangroves or distribution of clean stoves to replace polluting methods of cooking in poor rural communities. And thousands of people sought shelter. Ports were shut down and landslides blocked mountain roads in the Philippines on Monday as the nation was struck by a force cyclone in less than a month. Strong winds and heavy rain toppled trees and flooded roads as Typhoon Toraji made landfall in the province of Aurora Monday morning. No casualties have been reported so far after the typhoon plowed through the mountainous interiors. As per local authorities, at least 8,000 people have been evacuated from coastal areas and landslide-prone areas in the provinces of Aurora, Isabela, Ifugao and Mountain Province. And in response to the difficulties caused by heavy rainfall in Colombia, the country's President Gustavo Petro announced on Sunday a state of national disaster. The declaration aims to facilitate the mobilization of necessary resources to assist those affected throughout the country and mitigate the negative effects of floods and droughts. Starting on Tuesday, a logistical operation will begin to distribute the first emergency kits in the department of Choco. In the region, the most affected by the rains, more than 30,000 families have been preliminarily reported as affected, with impacts in 27 of the 31 municipalities of the department. Meanwhile, Spain's military used on Monday helicopters to lift wrecked cars near rivers after deadly floods in Valencia. Footage released by Spain's military emergency unit forces showed military helicopter moving a destroyed car from the bank of the Miares River to a location where the wreckage could be picked up by transportation vehicles. Over 220 people lost lives due to torrential rains on October 29 that triggered floods sweeping through the suburbs south of the regional capital, Valencia. On Monday, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez also announced 3.76 billion euros in additional measures to reconstruct the Valencia area after the deadliest flash floods in Spain's modern history. The first measurable rainfall over New Jersey since September raised hopes on Monday of snuffing out a rash of wildfires that has plagued the state, while stronger winds brought concern that a California blaze that had already destroyed dozens of structures could start expanding again. However, the rainfall did little to slow the wildfire as strong winds after the rain further fueled the fire. Wildfire outbreaks are a relatively common occurrence in California, but the East Coast blazes are unusual. The largest of them has torched about 5,000 acres in a forested area straddling the New York-New Jersey border. Brian Gallagher a forest ranger with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, warned that the fire will get larger. Now, thousands of Germans kicked off the carnival season in the stronghold of Cologne on Monday at precisely 11:11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month. The traditional countdown in Hugh Market Square, in which onlookers dressed in colourful costumes participated, is the start of the 5th season, accompanied by chants of Qualia Laugh, meaning Cologne rules. Still to come on this edition of DD India News Hour. India calls for urgent UN Security Council reform, stresses need for representation and change. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Khan speaks exclusively to DD India about Prime Minister Modi's priorities in the upcoming G20 summit in Rio. And the winter wonderland, Kashmir receives season's first snowfall.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. Some more stories. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Russia's first Deputy Prime Minister Denis Manturov will co-chair the 25th session of India-Russia Intergovernmental Commission on Trade, Economic, Scientific, Technological and Cultural Cooperation in New Delhi. The Intergovernmental Commission serves as the highest level forum for bilateral economic collaboration between the two countries, covering a broad range of areas from trade to cultural exchange. Russian First Deputy PM will also hold various bilateral meetings during his visit to India. And the first Deputy Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, Denis Manturov, called on India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday. Both the leaders exchanged views on enhancing cooperation in various areas, including trade and economic ties, energy, connectivity, among others. PM Modi welcomed the sustained and joint efforts being made by the teams in both sides for the implementation of the decisions taken during his recent visits and meetings with President Putin to further strengthen India-Russia special and privileged strategic partnership. PM Modi extended his warm greetings to President Putin and said he looked forward to continued exchanges with him. Now, India has called for urgent reforms to the United Nations Security Council, noting that despite decades of discussions, there have been no significant changes since 1965. India's permanent representative to the UN, Parvatneni Harish, on Monday said that in spite of several decades of collective reiteration of reforms, it is disheartening that no results were seen in this regard since 1965, when the Council was last expanded in the non-permanent category alone. He was addressing the plenary meeting of the General Assembly in New York. Harish pointed to three key factors hindering progress, which includes the ineffective intergovernmental negotiation process, the insistence on consensus by some countries, and the lack of representation for the Global South. He pointed to the example of the G20, where India's presidency last year welcomed the African Union as a member, demonstrating that with political will, change is possible.
Tasked with the responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, the Security Council has too often found itself paralyzed by the geopolitical realities of today, which have evolved far beyond the realm of that of 1945. In today's interconnected world, Mr. President, a more equitable council is very essential. We cannot go on with the relics of the past for the demands of the future. India has consistently championed a cooperative, inclusive, and consultative approach to international relations. We firmly believe that the calls for reformed multilateralism, with Security Council reforms at its core, is supported by the overwhelming majority of the membership.
And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be focusing on multiple issues ranging from enhancing global growth to sustainable development at the 2024 G20 summit, which is taking place in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro on the 18th and 19th of November. Speaking exclusively to DD India's Gautam Roy, India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant said India will also play a constructive role in building consensus among all member nations on contentious matters like the Ukraine and West Asian conflicts.
The 2024 G20 summit is set to be held in Brazil's Rio de Janeiro on the 18th and 19th of this month, and India is a founding member of a grouping of the world's most impressively financially powerful countries. And well, leading India will of course be Prime Minister Modi, and along with him will be G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant. He's with us right now. Thank you for speaking to DD India. Could you tell us, in terms of the kind of things that Brazil is taking forward, it's got its agenda set on eliminating hunger and poverty, sustainable development and reform of global institutions. Is that what Prime Minister Modi will also have on his plate, or will there be something more that he would like the G20 to move forward on?
Oh, the Prime Minister will focus on a range of issues concerning the global South, and the challenges relate to driving growth, balanced, sustainable, inclusive growth. And the challenge is that the global growth is slowest at the turn of the century. It's the developed countries are growing at 1.8%, the global growth is about 3.3%, but emerging markets are growing at 4.4%, and two-thirds of the growth in the coming 3-4 decades will come from emerging markets. So growth is important to achieve the SDG goals. And SDG goals are important because we need to have an impact on the citizens of the world.
And when the G20 meeting was held in September in India, when India was the host, one of the biggest challenges was the conflict in Ukraine. Now, a year down the line, slightly more, the conflict in West Asia has been added to it. So these are tremendous challenges. How will the G20 tackle it? The last time consensus was built for the Delhi Declaration on the first day itself. Is it going to be more challenging, less challenging this time?
I think this will be a complex issue. There will be many more challenges. We struggled with it. We did about 300 hours of negotiation on one para of Russia-Ukraine. We failed 16 times but arrived at a consensus on the Russia-Ukraine war, where even the United Nations has not been able to arrive at a consensus so far. So there will be challenges because post our summit, we've had the Israel, Middle East, Gaza crisis, and that's a huge humanitarian crisis. And some of the countries have a very strong view on this, so they'll all express it. How it will play out in the coming days will have to be seen. But India will always play a positive and constructive role.
You mentioned the Global South, and one of the significant things that happened when India was hosting G20 was the inclusion of the African Union, 55 countries, as a full-fledged member. How do you think this time around that will make a difference to the kind of deliberations and decisions that might take place in the summit this time around?
India has been very instrumental. Prime Minister Modi has been very instrumental in making G20 an inclusive society, and the voice of the African Union will have to be heard very strongly at the Brazil summit also. And therefore, I think India has played a key and a critical role, and African Union will play a very major role in Brazil.
The European Union leaders met just a few days ago, and they were sort of recalibrating because you have a big change that's taking place in the United States. A Trump presidency will begin in January. Will that sort of recalibration be there for the G20 as well, because of the kind of agenda Donald Trump has, the MAGA agenda, his views on the environment very different from some of the other leaders in the G20?
The challenge will be that America continues to play a very key and a critical role because it's a society which accounts for about 26% of the global GDP. It accounts for about 44% of the market capitalization. With just 4% of the population. And therefore, US voice will be heard, but also the voice of other European leaders is important, and so will be the voice of Russia and China.
Thank you, Mr. Kant, for joining us and talking about what lies ahead for the G20. And clearly, it is to build consensus on critical global issues. With camera person Vinay Tiwari, Gautam Roy, DD India.
And India has leapfrogged into the semiconductor technology with Defence Research and Development Organisation of India designing a 4-inch silicon carbide chips and 150-watt gallium nitride chips. They will fuel next-generation applications in artificial intelligence and aerospace. These lighter, faster and more efficient semiconductors will be deployed in radars, unmanned systems and 5G and satellite communications. A small production facility has been built at Hyderabad in Southeast India to march ahead towards self-reliance or Atmanirbhar Bharat vision of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And campaigning for the first phase of assembly polls in East India's Jharkhand ended on Monday. 43 assembly constituencies will go to the polls in the first phase on Wednesday. Elections for Jharkhand Assembly will be held in 2 phases. Voting for the second and the final phase will be held on November 20th, while counting will take place on November 23rd. In Najafgarh, just outside New Delhi, an agrivoltaics farm blends agriculture with solar energy. This innovative approach supports India's food security and energy goals for a sustainable green future. DD India's Prasar Bharati with this report.
Today we take you to the agrivoltaics farm in Najafgarh just outside New Delhi, a shining example of how India is harmonizing agriculture with solar energy. Managed by the India Agrivoltaics Alliance, this farm showcases a groundbreaking approach. Agrivoltaics allows us to use land for both growing crops and generating solar power simultaneously.
We are doing double utilization of the land, in which we are gaining the sun power with respect to the solar panels, and we are doing cropping underneath of it. We made these 2 types of the prototype over here in the outskirts of Delhi. The purpose to develop the prototype is to demonstrate to all over India that we are able to do this type of the cropping, and nowadays the ministry is also behind it because they want to increase the farmer income. Over here we had multiplied the farmer income by 6 times.
Here, solar panels are elevated, creating space for crops like cabbage to flourish beneath them. The design features walkways for easy maintenance and scientific software that stimulates light and shade to optimize crop yield.
We have a land of 4 acres each on both the plants, and we have employed around, say, 25 people in this 8 acres of land. These people, they work here as farmers, as taking care of the cattle and cleaning the panels.
Balancing food security and energy access is crucial. By 2030, India will need approximately 311 million tons of food grains, while aiming for extensive solar and wind energy installation to achieve net zero by 2070. As India embraces agrivoltaics, it's vital to chart a sustainable path forward, ensuring that our future remains green. With camera person Gaurav Giri, this is Taposh Bhattacharya for DD India from Najafgarh, Delhi.
Now let's take a look at other stories making news. Massive explosions shook the IOCL refinery in Vadodara's Koili area on Monday, leading to an intense fire that could be seen billowing smoke up to 6 kilometers away. Panic spread quickly among nearby residents as fire crews and emergency responders rushed to control the blaze. 1 person was dead while many others were injured. The exact cause of the fire remains undetermined. The Indian Army hosted the annual Foreign Service Attaches briefing in New Delhi, where defence attaches from 64 countries discussed global security issues and India's perspectives. Chief of the Army Staff, General Upendra Dwivedi, led discussions fostering a deeper understanding of the Indian Army's strategic priorities and viewpoint on important global and regional developments. The 5th Bharat Ko Janiye quiz was virtually launched by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar on Monday. The quiz is being held online from 11th November to 11th December. The quiz was started in 2015 by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It is an endeavour of the Government of India to strengthen connect with the Indian diaspora and to engage foreigners keen to learn about India. It is designed to promote a deeper understanding of India's history, growth story and its contributions to the world. And higher reaches of Kashmir on Monday received the season's first snowfall, while plains were lashed by rains, ending a month-long dry spell in the valley. The snowfall and rain lowered the day temperature significantly, signalling the arrival of winter. So it's time to pack your bags and head to the winter wonderland. Still to come on DD India News Hour. Vistara Airlines' last flight landed in Delhi ahead of merger with Air India. And in sports, Grandmaster Arvind Chidambaram wins the Chennai Grandmasters 2024 chess event. 67 Grammy nominations announced. India makes its presence felt by earning multiple nominations. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. Vistara, joint venture between Tata Group and Singapore Airlines, will fully merge with Air India on Tuesday, marking a transition into a single consolidated service under the Air India banner. Earlier, Vistara's last flight from East India's Odisha took off for Delhi on Monday night, marking the end of the airline's operations from the state ahead of its merger with Air India. The flight UK 782 departed from Odisha's Biju Patnaik International Airport and landed at Delhi's Indira Gandhi International Airport. This flight was one of the final departures before the full merger of Vistara with Air India. Business updates. Asia's benchmark equity index crept higher early Tuesday after US stocks rose for a fifth session. Japanese shares led regional gains while stocks ticked lower in Australia and South Korea. Futures in Hong Kong pointed down amid disappointment over Chinese stimulus. Investors in Asia are still digesting Beijing's latest stimulus package, which relieved some of the debt burden on local governments but lacked the sweeping fiscal support many investors had hoped for. The next major item on the agenda looks to be US inflation figures due Wednesday. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average notched a record high close on Monday, lifted by bank stocks that benefited from optimism about Donald Trump's expected fiscal policies. Futures steadied as a rally on Wall Street now appear to be slowing, although benchmark indexes still egged out record highs. The S&P 500 gained 5.81 points, while the Nasdaq Composite gained 11.99 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 304.14 points. Wall Street has been on a tear after Trump's victory in the 2024 presidential election last week.
So you're seeing a continuation.
Now, India's benchmark indices may see a muted start on Tuesday, despite a rally in US stocks. On Monday, BSE, Sensex and NSE Nifty 50 closed flat in high volatile trade. Throughout the day, the indices fluctuated between gains of 0.8% and losses of 0.6%. Gains in information technology and financial stocks helped counterbalance worries about weak earnings and foreign capital outflows. Analysts suggest investors avoid buying Hindalco, ONGC and Asian Paints at current prices due to various technical indicators and market trends. Sports updates now. We'll start with chess. Grandmaster Arvind Chidambaram has won the Chennai Grandmasters 2024 chess event after beating Armenian-American Levon Aronian. The 25-year-old beat Aronian 2-0 in the tiebreaker to win the Masters section of the tournament. Earlier, Arvind Chidambaram ended India's top-ranked player Arjun Erigesi's undefeated streak in 6th round after having started off the competition with 5 draws. Erigesi has finished 3rd in the competition. Arvind Chidambaram also beat Param Magasudlu in the final round. Now, Lecce have named Marco Giampaolo as their new coach on a deal until the end of the season after parting ways with Luca Gotti last weekend. Lecce sacked Gotti on Saturday after a poor string of results left them languishing in the relegation zone. Lecce said in a statement that the coach has signed on agreement until June 30th, 2025 with automatic renewal in the event of reaching safety. Former AC Milan coach Giampaolo was most recently in charge of Sampdoria in 2022. Lecce are 3rd from bottom in Serie A with 9 points from 12 games. And Barcelona forwards Robert Lewandowski and Lamine Yamal will miss international duty with Poland and Spain respectively after sustaining injuries. Yamal missed Barca's 1-0 La Liga loss at Real Sociedad on Sunday due to right ankle injury suffered in the Champions League. The teenager could be out for up to 3 weeks and will miss Spain's Nations League clashes with Denmark and Switzerland. La Liga top scorer Lewandowski will be out for a little under 2 weeks with a back injury suffered on Sunday and will miss Poland's Nations League matches against Portugal and Scotland. And the nominations for 67th Grammy Awards have been announced, marking a significant moment in the music industry. India is making its presence felt this year after multiple nominations. Diptanshu Kashyap brings us more on this.
From the Beatles' first Grammy nomination in 28 years to Beyoncé, Kendrick Lamar and Taylor Swift leading the charge for next year's biggest awards, the nominations for the 67th Annual Grammy Awards have been unveiled. With a host of surprises and shocks, music lovers worldwide are in for an exciting race. India has also made its mark with multiple artists earning nominations featuring both familiar names and fresh faces. Indian music maestro Ricky Cage has earned a nomination for his album Break of Dawn in the Best New Age Ambient or Chant Album category. Meanwhile, British singer-songwriter Charlie, of Indian descent, has garnered 7 nominations across various categories, her first ever as a solo artist. Sister duo Nora Jones and Anushka Shankar, daughter of the legendary sitar virtuoso Pandit Ravi Shankar, each received nominations for their respective albums Visions and Chapter 2nd, How Dark It Is Before Dawn. Anushka Shankar also received an additional nomination for her collaboration with British artist Jacob Collier on the song A Rock Somewhere that has been nominated in the Best Global Music Performance category. This category also includes Indian origin artist Radhika Vikaria's album Warriors of Light and entrepreneur artist Chandrika Tandon's album Tripeni. The ceremony is set to take place on the 2nd of February next year, with India hoping to achieve even greater recognition. With Sujata Lochap, Diptanshu Kashyap's report for DD India.
Well, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS. Scan the QR code on the screen to download now. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Abhishek Mahajan. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.